Hi everybody, welcome to Talking Automotive. My name is John Sinclair and my co-host Mark Palavestra.
Hi John. Today we've got Stuart Charity. Stuart's the CEO of the Australian Automotive Aftermarket Association. Stuart shares with us how big the aftermarket industry is in this country. In fact, $35 billion big, and also outlines what the challenges and opportunities that present in the aftermarket side of this automotive industry. A very interesting discussion, some very interesting eye-openers for a lot of people.
Really fascinating, especially when you realize that it's 4 times the size of the new car business. So some great aspects come out of it. So let's jump into the show.
With 30 years' experience in auto logistics and state-of-the-art locations in 5 major Australian cities, Precar Fleet Services is an independent division of Precar Services, offering specialty fleet fit-outs for commercial applications ranging from simple tray and tow bar fitments to fully bespoke service body and accessory installation. With quality-assured safety, compliance and standardisation of vehicle builds, Precar Fleet Services are a premier all-in-one solutions provider for commercial vehicle fleet operators, leasing companies, and original equipment manufacturers. For further information on how Precar Fleet Services can assist in solving your commercial vehicle fit-out needs, please visit precar.com.au and click on the link to Fleet Services.
Today we've got the CEO of the Australian Automotive Aftermarket Association, Stuart Charity, who's going to share a lot of information around how big the industry is and some of the key challenges and opportunities that the automotive aftermarket presents. Welcome, Stuart.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me on the show.
Before we jump into our show, let's have a quick word from our sponsors. CarsApp is a digital platform across both web and app clients that helps sellers of motor vehicle assets to reach and transact with a larger audience in the B2B space. CarsApp allows you to seamlessly and efficiently list your wholesale inventory either by DMS integration or manual entry, and then transact either via a tender format or in the marketplace. Why let your wholesale inventory only be made available to a limited number of buyers when you can tap into an engaged buyer marketplace on CarsApp with a national reach of over 800 plus registered users? Increase your audience and improve your returns on your wholesale stock. Connect with CarsApp via LinkedIn or on the web at carsapp.com.au or reach out directly to Andrew Tyson at andrew.tyson@carsapp.com.au.
Yeah, thanks very much for joining us today, Stuart. It's great to have an opportunity to speak to you. The aftermarket is so fascinating and such huge potential and plays such a big part of the industry. Maybe just to kick us off, can you tell us this about, just quantify the size of the aftermarket part of the industry?
Yeah, sure. And you know, I think people are often surprised, and particularly the general public are often surprised at the size and the depth and breadth of the industry. They kind of know the brands, but they don't connect all the dots together. But certainly from our point of view, in terms of dollar terms, we value the industry, the entire aftermarket, which includes the car company dealerships and collision repair and so on. The entire industry is valued at around $35 billion per annum. So it's a major part of the sector.
Wow,
that's not just independent aftermarket, but that's everything that goes on a vehicle after it's manufactured, which is, I guess, the definition of aftermarket. In terms of parts supply and parts manufacturing more generally, a lot of the replacement parts on vehicles are imported, but we still have a very strong and vibrant four-wheel drive industry and a four-wheel drive manufacturing industry. And that alone contributes about $6 billion of that $35 billion in terms of sales of parts, accessories, wheels, tyres, that sort of thing. And around $1 billion of that is export revenue. So we're globally competitive at designing and manufacturing those four-wheel drive parts. And companies like ARB export to 100 different countries. So in terms of the split of, if you look at dealership repair and service and parts versus independent aftermarket, we believe we've got about 60% of the market. So we've actually got a larger market share than the franchise dealerships, albeit we tend to service the out of warranty vehicles. So we take the older vehicles, those vehicles, in that 1 to 4 year age group tend to stay with the dealership. In terms of the numbers of employees, the overall aftermarket again employs around 350,000 people, but that's the whole ecosystem. The aftermarket repair and service channel employs about 150,000 people, and we estimate there's something like 25 to 30,000 independent workshops nationally. It's hard to get accurate data on that, but certainly it's over 25,000 businesses, and the majority of those are actually family-owned businesses, whether they be a single site, Joe's Garage type business, or a lot of the banner groups are actually either franchise groups or they're independent groups that brand with a particular banner group. Repco Authorised Service, Bosch Service are examples of that. So the majority of the workshops that we see in Australia are small family-owned businesses.
And when you look at the as far as the four-wheel drive accessory and crash repair, are crash repairers getting bigger, or is it with crash avoidance that we're seeing with new cars and the refreshing of all the safety features in cars, has that impacted the crash industry?
I'll say at the outset, we don't represent the collision repair industry. We run a major trade show, the Australian Auto Aftermarket Collision Repair Expo. So we have the auto parts and accessory side and a collision version of that. So we do have good engagement with the industry, but we don't profess to represent them. But I certainly follow it pretty closely. And what I'd say is that industry has contracted in terms of overall volumes. It's also significantly consolidated in recent years. You've seen the emergence of AMA, which is an ASX-listed company that has bought up a number of individual site businesses, but also incorporated a number of chains and so on. And they recently acquired the Smart Repair Group from Suncorp, so they've grown into a major player there. So there's been consolidation and a contraction in the market. And yes, I think vehicles are more intelligent now, so there's a lot more systems on the vehicles. There's by their nature less accidents, but when they happen, they're more expensive because a lot of the vehicle needs to be replaced, and there's a lot more statutory write-offs now because of it's just cheaper to supply a new vehicle than to try and repair it, particularly when airbags have been deployed and some of the crash zones in the front of the vehicle have been impacted by the accident. So yeah, look, I think overall that business has contracted.
And also, the question then flows on to the service side of things. So with you've got 25,000 small independent family businesses. Have you seen consolidation in that area where there's more of the chains coming through in the aftermarket for servicing?
Funnily enough, there's been a lot of predictions about the need for consolidation, specialisation, and probably contraction in that market. But I'll be honest, we haven't seen it in the ABS numbers in recent years. There have been workshops that have closed, but then other ones have sort of sprung up to fill their place. The overall car park in Australia, so the number of registered vehicles, has been growing at about 2% per annum. It's probably tapered off a bit now. I haven't seen recent numbers. Obviously, new car sales have had about a year and a half of being impacted by economic factors and other factors. So that would slow it slightly. But we're seeing now a boom in second-hand vehicle prices. So the overall demand for vehicles, whether they be new or second-hand from Australians, is increasing at about 2% per annum. And if you multiply that across the fleet, which is about 19 million registered vehicles, that's an increase of over 300,000 vehicles a year. So the overall fleet is growing, and that's driving demand for service and repair work, which means that the network pretty well is staying around about the same size. We are seeing more of a trend of a pure independent joining a group, an organised group. It's I think, going to be increasingly more difficult for a standalone, all makes, all model independent repairer to survive going forward with all the technology that's on vehicles now, the proliferation of different brands of vehicles being sold in the Australian market, the need for diagnostic equipment and technology in your workshop and so on. So what the banner groups do is give them business support in terms of how they market their business, how they brand their business, but also a lot of technical training, a lot of systems, back-end systems, and so on. And they're able to provide access to diagnostic repair services and information at reduced prices, cooperative buying, and so on. So there's a lot of benefits in being in those groups. So we see those groups growing, but there's no reason why they won't still be those independent businesses that are just part of that larger banner group. What I think we will start to see, it's inevitable, is we will start to see more specialisation. We've seen it in the last decade or more with Euro specialists and so on, but I think you'll get more brand specialists just because the tools and information that you're going to need to service 50 plus brands of vehicles and all different models is just going to be too big for one workshop to do. So they'll specialise in particular brands. But we'll also see specialists in diagnostics, for instance. So the people that have got all the equipment and all the expertise and can do all the reprogramming and troubleshooting and so on. Any vehicle that's a problem vehicle that needs diagnosis will get farmed out to a diagnostic specialist. And that's already happening now. I mean, dealers work out to diagnostic specialists in the independent aftermarket as to normal repair workshops. So I think you will start to see a bit of change. And I think over time we'll start to see some consolidation as well. If you look at the demographics of workshop owners in our sector, a lot of them are sort of mid-50s. Now the kids don't want to work in the business anymore. They don't really have a succession plan and so on. A lot of them own the businesses that their sites on. They might sell them off or even just close the business and lease out the commercial site. But so we will see some consolidation. But I think what we'll see is larger, more well-equipped workshops that are taking their place. So overall, I'm pretty optimistic about volumes and market share for our industry, but it will look a bit different in 10 years. I'll be staggered if we're sitting here in 10 years and there isn't a big change in the makeup of the independent repair network.
Now, Stuart, in terms of alternative fuels and that, where does that fit in? And where do you see EVs coming into the market? And what part will they play in terms of EV?
Yeah, look, a couple of things to say about alternative fuels. I mean, we provide a lot of market intelligence to our industry, so we've got a pretty good handle on numbers. And I can tell you, out of those 19 million registered vehicles in Australia, only about 200,000 of them, so less than 1%, are what you would term alternative fuels. And the majority of those are either hybrid, so petrol electric hybrid, or there's still about 80,000 LPG vehicles registered on Australian roads. So you take those out and look at EVs in isolation. I think they're 0.01% of the car park at the moment. So very, very tiny market share. But having said that, you can't ignore what's happening in the global automotive industry. And I mean, Australia because of its size, we are a technology taker. So we're going to be driven by the trends of the global automotive industry. So there's no doubt that EVs and perhaps hydrogen and other alternative fuel sources are going to be the future. It will be driven by environmental policy and by changes in the OEMs. Having said that, I'd make 2 points there. I think Australia, because of some of our unique characteristics, will be a slow adopter of that new technology and new trends, simply for the reason at the moment, the price differential between electric and ICE vehicles is massive for the same vehicle. So you have to be fairly well off to be paying such a significant premium. So that narrows the market. I think we've got infrastructure issues with fast charging and so on, and we've got such a large continent that it's going to cost a huge amount of money to roll out a viable EV charging network. So, how long is that going to take? And we're always going to have issues with range and so on. And we have a particular lifestyle here where we love getting out, we love camping and boats and caravanning and that sort of thing. So I think we've got some particular characteristics in the Australian market that are going to mean that we'll be slower to take up EV than perhaps European and some of the Asian countries. The other point that I'd make around EVs is that a lot of people talk about EVs being the end of servicing and the aftermarket. And no doubt they've got less moving parts on them, but they've still got tyres and suspension and brakes and a lot of other elements on the vehicle. So they're still going to need to be serviced and maintained. So possibly less servicing work, more vehicles and so on, and it'll be different type of work on those vehicles. And the simple fact is that the aftermarket hasn't geared up for EV because there's just not demand out there at the moment. But as soon as there is, when there's a commercial opportunity, our industry is very quick to take that up. And there's EV standards around setting up workshops and so on. And we've got no doubt that the aftermarket will respond when there's sufficient vehicles out there to warrant the capital investment and the focus on it.
And you mentioned, Stuart, the LPG. By the grey hair on my head, you can see that I recall, and when I spent time at General Motors, LPG 15 years ago was a pretty hot topic, given that this country has 100 years supply of LPG if we want to use it. Where is it in the aftermarket? Do people convert older cars to LPG still, or is that totally just dead and off the table?
That market's just disappeared. And it's interesting, I remember that as well, and I remember when there was doubt about the future of the car manufacturing industry. Governments did studies into what our competitive advantages were, and one of them was in in LPG technology, and because we've got the supply. But the simple fact is that market was propped up alone on government subsidies. If the LPG price hadn't been subsidised by government and wasn't so low to cover the cost of conversion, then there wasn't a market. So it was essentially an artificial market that was created by government through incentives. Artificial markets don't have a long and illustrious history because once the subsidy goes, the market goes as well. And as I said before, I'll go back to my original comment that we're a technology taker here from an automotive perspective. We're never going to be big enough to be able to influence what's happening globally from a trend point of view in the automotive industry. So it's probably foolhardy for the governments to try and influence the market through short-term subsidies.
Stuart, what do you think are the biggest challenges facing the industry from your perspective?
Yeah, look, there's a lot. There's a lot of opportunities, but there are a number of challenges facing both our sector of the aftermarket, but also the broader automotive industry. The biggest issue at the moment, ironically, is skill shortages and skills gaps for that matter. So we estimate that there's a shortage of around 35,000 automotive technicians. That's across dealerships, independent and also collision.
That is a hell of a lot. That is huge.
Yeah, it is. And there's some structural reasons behind that. I think automotive's not really seen as a sort of sexy industry to get into. It's got a perception as being low paid and dirty work and fairly menial. So I think as an industry we've got to look at ways that we can change the perception of young school leavers, their parents and career advisors in schools and so on, but we're just not getting that pipeline of really good talent coming into the industry, and a lot of the people that get into apprenticeships are not completing them. So there's some work to do from an industry perspective to make it more attractive to people, because the reality is that there is exciting careers, and I think there's going to be more lucrative careers as technology changes, and you're more likely to be sitting in the passenger seat with a laptop or an iPad repairing a vehicle these days, rather than under with a spanner and so on, because so much of EVs are just going to accentuate that. So much of what is done on a vehicle now is electronics, diagnostics, and working with computer programming and so on. So it's quite the skill sets that are going to be needed in the future are going to be different too for the younger people. So we've got a job as an industry, and not just our industry, but right across, to try and make it more attractive to younger people. But there's also skills gaps in, there's a lot of people that did their trade, 30, 40 years ago that are trying to work on modern vehicles, and you do need different skill sets and different training. So there's an upskilling required across the industry to adapt to the technology that's on vehicles. So skills gaps are a big challenge for us. The perennial challenge for us is the vehicle manufacturers and their activities. They're commercial entities, and they're doing everything they can to try and lock consumers into dealerships for as long as they can. So cap price service and longer warranties and so on. So we as an industry, we think we've got a pretty strong value proposition, but we need to counter those offers. And the simple fact is that car companies and dealers make a lot of their money through the parts and service. Where there's a commercial imperative, there's always going to be a challenge. But I think we're up for the challenge. One of the things that we were lacking, we felt like we were going into a fight with one hand tied behind our back, was the restricting access to electronic repair and service information. So we've been able to get a bit of government attention on that, and there's a law that will go through Parliament this year to mandate that all repairers get access to repair and service information on fair and reasonable commercial terms. I think once that comes through, we'll be well placed to compete with OEMs going forward. Another trend, and I guess the next sort of issue, is car companies are wanting to have more direct connection with consumers. They've always been sort of one step removed, and we're starting to see some changes in the way that they sell vehicles. And I know James Fortman and his team at the AAAA are in a bit of a fight at the moment over changes in dealership models. But what we're seeing is technology will play a part in that as well. And one of the things we're concerned about is telematics, which is basically wireless communication with the vehicle, and that enables the car companies to communicate directly with the vehicle, which cuts out the dealers and cuts out the independent aftermarket. It will also be able to they'll be able to communicate with the vehicle owner through the vehicle itself, so that the vehicle will be able to say it's got a fault code that's triggered, or it's due for a service. You want me to book it in on this date? We'll have the part organised and ready to go. So that creates some technology threats for us if left unregulated. So we're about having a level playing field here. So our latest campaign, and this is a global campaign, is about your car, your data. All we want is transparency and choice over what data the vehicle's generating, who it's being shared with, and for what purposes, and giving the car owner that transparency and choice. So do you want your car communicating directly to the car companies, or would you rather it communicate directly with your preferred repairer? So that's something that's an issue that's on the horizon that we're fighting on behalf of consumers and on behalf of our industry. But look, there's a lot of other changes. There's changes in the parts supply chain. We're seeing far more consolidation because the parts suppliers need scale and efficiency to be able to get the right part out to the right place at the right time, with so many different vehicles on Australian roads. I mean, the mind boggles when you think about how many different makes and models and this large country of ours, and most cars get serviced same day. The supply chain that gets those parts out to those workshops at the right time is massive and very complex, and that spelt the demise of a lot of small wholesalers and distributors and resellers of parts. So you're seeing the likes of Repco and Bursons through the Bapcor ASX listed group really take strong market share and buy out a lot of competitors in that space, and then they're now dealing with online sales. is a bit of a challenge for the traditional bricks and mortar retailers, but again, one that we think our industry is up for. So a lot of challenges, but a lot of opportunities as well.
Wow, there's a lot coming from all different angles, isn't there? Because that then leads another question. In OEM land, we always talk of standards and trying to get raising the standards across all dealerships in your franchise group. And as far as what are the challenges from a technology in the commerce side because I appreciate that there's a technical bits and the people bit, which is a staff bit, but even just booking systems, OEMs and dealers are very sophisticated with their booking system. Dealer management systems are very sophisticated. Do you see that same level of sophistication with the mum and dad type service outlets, or is there an appetite to change that, or how does that work right now? Is it still a bit of paper and a pen, and they write in a diary, and this is who got booked in for today? I don't know. I'm just keen to get an understanding.
One of the challenges that I didn't mention was changing consumer tastes and consumer behaviour. I mean, consumers are searching for services online. They're reading Google reviews. A lot of people don't want to pick up a phone and book their car in. They'd rather do it on an online booking system and so on. So, of course, I mean, we've got the whole gamut. If you're talking booking systems, we've got the whole gamut of, I'm sure there are workshops out there that are still taking manual bookings in a notepad, but the majority have moved to more sophisticated booking systems. And I talked about the move of independents to join those supported groups, and they're driving far more sophistication into those businesses in all parts, not just booking systems, but in the way they present their businesses, in the way they market to consumers, the equipment that they have, the training that they have, and in all aspects, getting far more efficiency in how they operate their businesses. Parts ordering systems that are linked, with so taking out that whole parts interpreting, trying to work out which is the right part for the vehicle. They've got systems now where Repco's got. You just key in the registration number, and it links into the roadworthy system. You get the VIN number, and all of a sudden you know exactly what parts on the vehicle. It reduces a lot of waste and duplication. So, look at the aftermarket is already a lot more sophisticated than I think people give us credit for, and will become more so as you get that further consolidation, and only the strongest workshops will survive. I mean, we're in a competitive market, and that's how it works. And if you don't move with your consumer behaviour and tastes, then you're going to get left behind and run over. And if you're not investing as a workshop owner in training and tools and so on, you're just not going to be able to service and repair the vehicles that are in showrooms and driving around on Australian roads now. So there is a steady change going on in the aftermarket. And as I said, I think you'd be foolhardy to bet against us. We've shown we're a fairly resilient lot over the years, and we've adapted to a whole lot of changes. The technology is definitely changing quickly, but our industry is very, very entrepreneurial at its heart, and is changing very quickly.
Now, Stuart, can you tell us a little bit more about your organisation and what support and help you offer your members?
Yeah, sure. So we have just over 2,500 member companies nationally, and they range from, and it's pretty well the end-to-end supply chain of the automotive aftermarket. So we've got parts manufacturers, importers, distributors, the major retailer groups, and then we've got repair and service members as well. We tend to be skewed more towards the banner groups in the repair and service side. So we don't have huge numbers of small one-site businesses. We've targeted the groups for a strategic reason. We believe a lot of them are the future, and they're all also, it's far easier to communicate and so on. But so our members collectively, as I said, 2,500 businesses, but probably over 6,000 sites, including retail sites and repair and service sites nationally. In terms of the services we offer, look, the main one is the advocacy and representation. As I said, we're predominantly small business industry with some we've got a few billion-dollar corporations thrown in there as well. So we've got the whole gamut. But even going from the GPCs, which is the Repco's parent, and Babcor's, they still need advocacy and representation. So we do a lot in competition issues. Obviously, I talked about mandatory data sharing. That's been a big 10-year campaign to get that legislation through. It's not quite there yet, but it will be this year. But then there's infrastructure around operationalising that legislation. We also do a fair bit in trying to shed light on any anti-competitive practices that are happening in our sector, and I think the ACCC's been pretty active in pulling up OEMs in particular for anti-competitive behaviour. We talked earlier about the perception that independent repairers are sort of transgressing the law or cowboys or whatever. But the simple fact is that I think at least 5 of the 10 major car companies, from a volume perspective, have had court enforceable undertakings against them in the last few years by the ACCC for breaches of Australian consumer law. So it's shining a light on that. We also do a lot in vehicle standards. We have a patchwork system in Australia around modification, because it's basically the domain of the states. Once a vehicle's, we have new car regulations through the ADRs, but once a vehicle is on road, it becomes the responsibility of the states. So raising and lowering vehicles, putting bull bars on them, light, auxiliary lighting, emissions, if you're changing the exhaust or so on, all the standards and testing protocols and whatever we get heavily involved with, and work with subcommittees of our members to work with the regulators on coming up with sensible regulations that ensure ongoing compliance, ADR compliance, and full integration with active and passive safety systems on vehicles. We've now even gone to the point where we've launched an engineering development and test centre, so the Auto Innovation Centre. So we've got steering robots, we've got a whole fleet of vehicles, we've got test equipment, we've got 3D scanners, 3D printers. We've got about $4 million worth of equipment downstairs, and a team of engineers that work with the industry in a collaborative way. So that's a lot of what we do, but we do market intelligence and trends and get information out to the industry on what's coming down the line and how to adapt to it. We offer commercial opportunities for our members through predominantly things like our expo. So our expo is a biannual event held in Melbourne. We have nearly 500 exhibitors, 12,000 trade visitors come through. We do seminar programs for about 3,000 attendees over the 3 days. We have a dinner and an awards program. About 1,000 people go to the dinner. So major event for us. Unfortunately, we couldn't do it this year because of COVID. It was supposed to be next month. We'll be doing it again in April 2022. We also published a magazine, the Australian Automotive Aftermarket magazine, that goes out to about 15,000 of those 25,000 workshops in a hard copy format on a monthly basis. And then we do an e-zine or an electronic version of that as well. Up until COVID, we were helping our local manufacturers export. So we run national pavilions in major trade shows around the world. So the SEMA show in the US, Automechanica in Frankfurt, Automechanica Shanghai, and so on. So really helping our industry internationalise. A lot of different things in different areas, and one of the areas that we're going to focus on is trying to, I guess, educate and promote the value proposition of our industry to consumers, and try and raise or change perceptions about what a career in the automotive industry is all about. So that's something that we're working on as a new initiative. So look, we've got a decent sized team here, and a lot of different activities going on.
Wow, that's a hell of a diverse portfolio of activities that you do. I think a lot of people, and pardon my ignorance, I've only been in this business for 40 years, John. But that's actually a real eye-opener for how big your organisation is and the things that you do. you play in the domain of what a lot of OEM car manufacturers in this country used to do. So when you talk about the compliance and the standards and the business practices and doing those expos, that's pretty significant.
Yeah, you'll have to come to our expo. You'll visually see the depth and breadth of our industry. It's 5 in the old measurements, 5 acres of floor space. So we take virtually the whole of the Melbourne Exhibition Centre. It's absolutely massive, and if you're coming by this way, the Innovation Centre is pretty spectacular as well. That we launched that in December 2019, and it's very high tech, and look, it's got to be. Our industry has to keep raising the bar in terms of how they develop and test products, because the cars that they're putting those products on are far more sophisticated now. We need to make sure that they fully integrate with the systems on the vehicle. It is a very high tech industry, and not that dissimilar to some of the OEM operations as well.
What does the future hold for the industry?
Look, I'm very, very optimistic about the future of our industry. As I said, I think you'd have to be a brave person to bet against us. There's no doubt we've got our share of challenges, but we've got a lot of opportunities as well. We've done a fair bit of consumer research, I guess, trying to identify what our value proposition is, and I do believe that we will, in our essence, we'll maintain a similar structure to what we've had in the past going forward. And I don't just make that observation from the seat of my pants. I've done a lot of travel overseas. I think we all know in the automotive industry that we're probably a few years behind what's happening in Europe and North America, and we've got a lot of connection with our sister associations in particular the US. And I think the US market is the most similar to our market anywhere in the world. Obviously we're a much smaller version, but the taste of vehicle owners over there, the consumer taste, the structure of the industry, the market share of dealers versus independent, the fact that they like to accessorise and personalise their vehicles, and they're wildly into motorsport and other things as well. They're car lovers, or gearheads, as they say over there. So we've done a lot of analysis of the US market, because we think that's where our future is. And if you look at the US market, they've had data sharing there since 2013. The independent channel is thriving and growing, but funnily enough, is what I've been trying to say all along, the dealerships are also doing well. There was quite a bit of contraction a few years back when we went through the GFC, but the dealers are very profitable, and a lot of them are selling aftermarket parts. They've got good, better, best parts programs, and they're doing multi-brand repairs and so on. So, but one of the things that I've seen in the US market that I think will happen here is that you've got these large trade suppliers to the independent aftermarket workshops, and they're really stepping up with a whole lot of business systems and support mechanisms. And it's got to the point, and you see this in the collision repair industry with the paint companies. Collision repair workshops just don't change their paint companies willy-nilly. They're investing in the particular equipment, the spray guns and so on. But the paint companies also provide all the business systems and processes that underpin that workshop. And I see that happening with our major trade resellers, the likes of Repco and Bursons will be the main ones that will step up. So their future and their is in the hands of their customers, which are those independent workshops, and they've got the scale now and the resources to be able to really step up and support those family-based workshops moving forward. So you will see a change in the way our industry operates, but I don't think you'll see massive changes in the overall structure. And I think we can maintain, if not grow, our market share going forward. I think there is always going to be a need in Australia to customise vehicles. We're buying every vehicle that's brought into this country now is built off a global platform, and Australia, as I said, has some unique characteristics. So I think we're tow bars and bull bars for rural and regional and other modifications are are always going to be needed here. I think the change to fuels is going to present its challenges, but again, I think our industry is up and will adapt. A couple of weeks ago, I went to a member business, Injectronics, that is part of the GUD listed group. So they own Ryco and Nava and other major brands, and they've just launched a product that's basically a hybrid battery exchange program. So rather than doing a full battery replacement on a Prius or one of the older Camry hybrids, because they have a finite life and they're very expensive. You're talking about $12,000 plus battery replacement. Sometimes that's worth more than the vehicle itself. They've now got a system where you can basically exchange a faulty hybrid battery with a remanufactured one. So they just supply a new one, they give it a warranty, and it's about a quarter of the price of a brand new battery. So there's some innovation just in that hybrid space. So look, we think our industry will adapt and continue to innovate, and we see quite a bright future.
Yeah, Stuart, what's quite interesting for me, because I worked in Europe under block exemption, and there you have to provide all the RP material to service providers. And if someone wants to become a dealer, a service authorized repairer, you can't, as an OEM, can't stop him becoming an authorized repairer as long as he meets all the standards and requirements. And to me, when I got there, I was quite horrified. I thought, the system can never work. But it actually works really well. And I think it benefits both the OEM and the authorized repairers, because those guys who want to step up to the next level can do so. And you get better coverage for your customers from a service point of view, and retaining customers to probably sell them vehicles in the long term. So it's interesting that sometimes you see things and you think, well, that can never work, but it actually works quite well.
Yeah, I think because we've had the same sort of model in Australia for so long, we kind of think that's all it can be. And it's only when you do go overseas, and up until last year, I did regularly, and I tell people I don't need a crystal ball in this industry. I just need to get on a plane and get overseas and see what's going on there, because you do get a really good insight. And I don't believe that the traditional model of OEMs just supplying to franchise dealers and then the aftermarket competing for the older vehicles, that's not necessarily the only business model moving forward. And we've already seen in Europe and in the US quite significant changes to those business models. And I think they're still a long way off, and others probably more qualified to talk on this than me. But even the sales model of getting vehicles to consumers is going to change, because people are more comfortable shopping online. Obviously, they need to be able to. They want to test drive and they want to be able to see and feel a vehicle before they buy it. But the buying process, there's no reason why that the majority of that couldn't go online. As I said, in the US, dealers are doing aftermarket multi-brand repairs, offering different parts options and so on. Yeah, the Europe has that sort of quasi dealership model that works for them. Yeah, I think the market will evolve based on what consumers demand and so on. We just want to make sure that we're fighting an even fight, in the sense of we can't have a situation where there's technology lockouts and so on, because that is anti-competitive, and in the end, the only people that are going to suffer are Australian car owners. We need competition and choice, and I think we bring that to the table. I think franchise dealers bring that to the table, and they will become more entrepreneurial as time goes by as well, because I think that the traditional model, as we know it now, won't survive into the future. It'll be a hybrid of different models.
No, I was just going to ask Stuart, because I saw we came to the end of the questions. I just wanted to ask, is there anything you would like to add? Because I think it's been fascinating to me. I've been quite surprised at how I knew the industry was big, but I didn't realize how big it was. The second
big.
thing is I didn't realize how many service providers there are. It's 25, 30,000. It's just huge numbers. So it's very fascinating.
I mean, if you look at the size of Australia and the population distribution of Australia, there's a independent repairer just about in every little town and so on, all across this great land. And as I said, the overall car park has been growing in line with population growth in Australia and so on. So there's a big market out there, and it's really important to Australian car owners to have that competition and choice to be able to keep the cost of owning and running a vehicle as low as possible, and enhancing the ownership experience. So and look, it is a big industry. I love the industry. I've been in this job now for 15 years. I think my longest job prior to this was under 5 years. I used to get bored very quickly, but this is not a job that you can get bored in. I think the greatest thing about our industry is the people. Our people are just so amazing and entrepreneurial, but down to earth as well. You go to parts manufacturers. I mean, everyone talked about the fact that when the car manufacturing industry closed down in Australia, that it was the demise of all automotive manufacturing. Couldn't be further from the truth. I mean, our manufacturers are booming, and I just love, and particularly early on, I wanted to sort of get a feel for the industry and who's who and what they did, and I used to do a lot more sort of membership calls than I do these days. But you'd get out and you'd see the business, it'd be in the suburbs of Sydney or Brisbane, and you'd walk into one building, and the business had started 20 years ago, and they'd say, okay, well, we've got manufacturing in that building, and we've got warehousing, dispatch in that building. And you'd walk down. They basically own the whole street, and then ultimately they'd outgrow that, and then they'd have to build a new business or move into a new site to consolidate everything together. But these businesses just were people that had a good idea and not only made a mark for themselves in Australia, but almost all of them, in fact, absolute majority of our manufacturers export, and they've been going all over the world selling Australian innovation and products for years. And we are quite well recognised in particularly in that specialty equipment area, four-wheel drive, high performance and motorsport. I mean, PWR on the Gold Coast provide the cooling systems for the Red Bull Formula One car. You've got Motec that does all the onboard diagnostics for race vehicles, the live and real-time diagnostics. You've got all these amazing companies that most people have never even heard of unless they're in the motorsports industry or whatever. So, there's just so much innovation and passion out there, and it's a really, really good industry to be involved in.
No, thank you, Stuart. This is actually quite a significant story to tell, and for a couple of OEM guys, it's great to hear. And I'm a passionate local manufacturer person. It's a shame that we lost the full automotive manufacturing, but it's actually really encouraging to hear that we actually have so much manufacturing of components, and not just basic components, very high performance components and IP that we're selling to the world. That's a great story. And I share your enthusiasm. I've never been. I've had many friends go to SEMA. I hear that is definitely like going and looking 5 years into the future every time you go in there, and just the way business is done, and the technology and the trends that you're seeing. So I envy you for that opportunity to go there, and also to Frankfurt and over to Shanghai too.
No, it's well, I think SEMA and Frankfurt, for different reasons, are absolutely almost bucket list things. SEMA, as you say, it's that specialty equipment, so it's the high performance motorsport and four wheel drive. The technology and the size, that's an $80 billion industry on its own in the US. So it's a massive market because they just love their cars and they love customizing. But the forecourt of the Las Vegas Convention Center grounds there, they have dynamic displays, but this amazing collection of vehicles, everything. The mind just it just blows your mind. So anyone
There'll be a few of these things there too.
There'll be plenty of them. Anyone that's interested in cars, you're like a kid in a lolly shop there. And then Frankfurt's probably more the commercial and repair and service side of the industry, but the scale of that is unbelievable. You've got to get a bus from one side to the other. 20 exhibition halls, some of them 4 or 5 levels. It's unbelievable, and that's when the penny drops on how big this industry is globally.
So I'll try to do your story some justice by summarising it, if I may. And please let me know if I've missed anything. All right. So in summary, Stuart, thank you once again for joining us and sharing the story about the Australian Automotive Aftermarket Association. And it was a surprise for both John and I that the business is actually a $35 billion business. And if you look at the 4x4 manufacturing alone, and we manufacture a lot here, it's a $6 billion business, of which $1 billion are exports and 350,000 employees in the overall industry. But more importantly, there's 25,000 small businesses that operate some sort of service or repair. And the challenges that you talked about were, it's hard to get people, like especially techs, into the business because it's not seen as sexy, it's low paid, and the conditions are not particularly good. But at the same time, you've got this massive challenge of all this new technology. There's EVs coming, but that's still only a 200,000 unit car park, and they're mainly hybrids. But you've acknowledged that it is coming. But it's that OEM, I suppose there's a bit of friction before with the OEMs controlling the IP, but freeing up that IP so that it can be shared with the aftermarket to service and repair vehicles at a cost-effective rate for the motoring consumer. But the other thing that I thought was interesting is you do a hell of a lot for your industry members with the compliance and the vehicle standards and the technology support and industry advocacy. A lot of the things that you do are very much like what an OEM would do here if you were a local manufacturer, making sure that you met various standards and of technical standards, but also business standards. So, making sure there's no anti-competitive behaviour that's being undertaken. But also at the same time, you're working with some of these big member organisations to provide exceptional services to their subsequent customers who are also members of yours, who are ultimately giving a really good parts and service experience to the 19 million car owners in this country. Now, we as new car OEMs only look at the 1 million new cars, and we think of the 3 million cars that are in the car park that OEMs usually look after for the first 3 years. But this massive car park that your members look after, and as you mentioned, there's one of your members in every town across this broad nation. So it's very important that there's that technology and skill set still maintained. But one thing that you really highlighted, and I think this is the ultimate for what you talk about the industry, because it still has some very bright futures, because of 2 things that the industry is very resilient in doing: adapting to change. And I've seen it with all the technology, even just through my career in this industry, that the aftermarket has adapted every time there's been new technologies and new models and the model proliferation that we've got, because ultimately it comes down to they're adapting because they're entrepreneurial. And that's an entrepreneurial spirit that leads us to be great innovators here, and also to the point where it's the unsung heroes of the auto business, where there's actually exporters in this country, in your industry. And that's a credit to you, your members. And it's actually a really good news story that a lot of people in this country are not aware of. And I really thank you for sharing it with us today.
Excellent. That was a great summary, mate.
That is so cool. That is so cool. I used to love going, when I was at Holden, I used to love going to the tech centre and just watch the engineers, and you took pride in what these guys were making. And it still breaks my heart that A, the manufacturing went, but then B, the brand disappeared. But, and I used to do a lot in the mining space, in the fleet space, and a lot of the accessories that your members manufactured, we would actually fit. But I would have all sorts of challenges with our organisation to get validation. It was this whole, that's got to be signed off, because certain customers wouldn't accept it unless it was signed off. Getting our engineers to engage on the journey was always something, can we do this, can't we? Because they're always scared to put their name to something. But when you look at that, that's 1 billion in exports. That's huge.
Yeah, it sure is. It sure is. And yeah, I think a lot of people say we're kind of the best kept secret of the industry, and we do want to start to change that. So we do want to start putting out more information and educate people on how big our industry is, but also maintain and service and get parts for those vehicles that the OEMs don't want to stock parts for anymore, so that they can get a competitive price for servicing. Wherever they live, that they get a choice of parts. They get to know their local workshop owner. They can they give them pre-warning that next time your car's coming in for service, you're going to need tyres, or you're going to need this or that, or whatever, so they can put a bit of money aside for it and so on. It's supporting local businesses and being in their area from a convenience point of view. So we think we've got a really strong value system, and we believe that given all things even, that the consumers will go to their independent repairer if they're confident that their warranty is going to be maintained, that they're going to get good service, and that they're equipped to repair and service that vehicle. But we think with data sharing, with the big resellers stepping up, and the rate of change that's going on in our industry, that we're up for the challenge, and we're going to be around with all the new technology and fuel systems and everything coming down the line. So it's an exciting. I mean, auto has always been an exciting industry because it is changing all the time, and it really is at that sort of cutting edge of consumer tastes and behaviour, and there's still so many passionate car people in this country. So it's always a good industry to be in, and an exciting one, and I don't see it changing or any time into the future.
I really appreciate it, and thank you.
No, thanks very much, Stuart. It's been really fascinating for me.
Thanks for listening today. Hopefully you got as much out of today's episode as John and I did. A few surprises in there for sure. If you like what you see or what you saw, please subscribe to our channel below. Tick the like button and share it with your network. Please share it on your LinkedIn network. And also, if you need more information whilst you're on LinkedIn, please reach out to either John Sinclair or myself, Mark Palavestra, for any questions, or if you need any further information, or if you'd like any assistance with any automotive-related topic.
Thanks very much for listening. We see you next week.